Okay, well, it's still sprinkling, but I'm gonna start making my way down this road right here. So hopefully the rain kind of lets up a little bit, but we're still gonna go. It looks like that truck right there was from Indiana. That might have been Barry Morphew right there.
So why was Barry Morphew shirtless and soaking wet on May 30th, 2020? Was he searching for Suzanne Morphew in the rain 20 days after she was reported missing?
This is where they tore it off. That was the police line, do not cross. So they just recently turned the house back over to the family. And I do believe that was Barry that just drove by in that silver truck. It did have Indiana license plates, and that's where they're from. So I'm gonna go up and see if I could talk to him. Stay with us.
So many people are familiar with Tyson Draper of Tiger True Crime. They're very familiar with Tyson's video of when he met Barry Morphew either on May 31st or June 1st, 2020, but not as many people know about this video. Tyson Draper being followed, to me, like a shark in that big truck. You can cue the theme from Jaws behind Tyson Draper before they had their big in-person meeting, the video everyone's seen.
This is where she disappeared, and the rain is coming down, and I just saw Barry Morphew pass by. He had no shirt on. He was soaking wet, and it looked like he was frantic. So I'm gonna go up here and see if I can talk to him. So stay with us, this is getting pretty crazy.
But this first video was so important that FBI superstar Johnny Grusing asked for a copy of it on June 25th, 2021. He wanted to know the date and timestamp and everything of this video.
I'm pretty sure that was Barry Morphew that just went by with the Indiana license plates. He looked pretty distraught, whoever that was. It was a man with no shirt on with a couple of other people in the truck. And anyway, he looked pretty distraught if it was him. And I do believe he's from Indiana, so that truck definitely had Indiana license plates. But here's little markers that you're seeing, probably from the search.
The link is below, and even though it says it was published on June 8th, 2020, it was actually filmed May 30th or so. I've seen more than one date reported, but it was exactly 20 days or so after Suzanne was reported missing, and Tyson describes Barry as being shirtless, distraught, soaking wet, and more. Everything that you could expect a husband with a missing wife to be at that point in time. There were a couple of other people in the truck with Barry, Tyson said. But what could the FBI glean from that video? Other reports from Tyson about that incident, he remembered that Barry was kind of leaning forward close to the steering wheel, and he was like very red. His chest was red. His chest and or his face was red. Tyson explained that he initially had taken down a lot of YouTube videos due to threats.
You know, get some information out there and look at things from a different view. I mean, all information is good information. So I wanted to say that first and foremost. I wanted to say thank you to all of you and express my love back to you who are good people. And so anyway, I just wanted to get that out there first and foremost. The next thing I wanted to talk about was some of the rumors and stuff that are going around out there. Was I threatened? Why did I take my videos down? Things like that. I'll be upfront and honest with you. Yes, I did receive threats. Never at any time did I ever say that it was Barry specifically or anyone associated with him. All I know is I got pretty horrible text messages after this all went down, some threats, some stuff involving my kids, because they were in some of the videos that I had on YouTube. So I panicked, as any person probably would in that situation. And I thought, you know, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I'll just get off of YouTube altogether and just forget about all this. This is crazy. But because of your encouragement and your love and your support, and having a good support system myself, a good family who also encouraged me, I'm gonna continue on. And I'm going to continue to fight for justice and for answers.
Other people who have reported about the Suzanne Morphew case from the beginning, a lot of them have also been threatened, who knows, by various anonymous people. Do you remember when Barry Morphew's realtor threatened to turn me in because I published photos of the Morphew home? In my opinion, in the video, Barry drives that loud and ominous truck aggressively around the corner, passing Tyson. So we don't have the exact date and time of video number 1. You know, stuff happens when you're a YouTuber behind the scenes, especially in these crime cases that aren't solved. Things can get a little wacky until justice is served. Some sleuths are wondering, why was Barry wet? Was he trawling around in the creek? Was he honestly looking for Suzanne? Or was he getting rid of evidence? Could he have been getting rid of her phone? Maybe he was just soaked, because we can see it was a rainy day. And maybe he took off his wet t-shirt because the cold weather was soaking him to the bone. But we can distinguish the days by looking at what Tyson is wearing, the t-shirt he wears that day, the rainy day, overcast day, compared to the more popular video where it's sunny outside, where he meets Barry and there's talk of mountain lions. But it was great to see CBI recently post a new tweet and a new web page, you know, reiterating they're looking for tips. There's an email address, there's a phone number that they've given. So with the finding of Suzanne, it's like this case has new life. There's a new resurgence of, you can almost taste it, Suzanne speaking from heaven to us almost. Like she's gonna get her justice. So today I thought, let me take a walk down memory lane, just hope and pray that cops can find the perpetrator. In that vein, let's go over what happened during Barry's preliminary hearing. You might remember I paid $321 for court transcripts, and it took many, many hours to read and edit the transcripts into videos that YouTube ultimately forced me to delete. I had to kind of do a restart in order to get back in the YouTube partnership program in 2022. Stuff happens. I mean, you know, Tyson's been through his thing on his channel. It can be a lot of things behind the scenes. But now that I've put enough of my face on my channel, and in this video particularly, I'm doing an intro here, and I'm no longer a faceless channel, they should be cool with me placing these court transcript videos once again on Plunder. So in this video, you'll hear me read the court transcript from August 9th, 2021. I'll try to do this in order, wherein witnesses will speak about Suzanne's affair partner, Jeff Libler. You'll hear talk about Barry telling his daughter that he had the perfect night with Suzanne before her disappearance, whereas her friend Sheila Oliver will contradict that and say that no, Suzanne had not had a perfect night with Barry in a long time. In these court transcripts I'm going to read, you will hear Sheila talking about the time in September 2018 when she was in Colorado visiting Suzanne, and they saw headlights, you know, turn short of the house, and they thought someone was outside snooping on them. Suzanne called 911 in fear, but it turned out that Barry was snooping on them. I wish I could get that 911 call. I feel like I've been rejected a lot, and I've gotten weird responses like there is no 911 call. But I know someone called 911 to report Suzanne missing, and then here's another instance, well, they might not have it from 2018, but Suzanne herself called 911. Anyway, Sheila will also talk in this court transcript about Suzanne visiting Sheila on Thanksgiving in 2018. I believe they were back in Indiana, and Suzanne had just stepped away to use the bathroom for a second, and Barry tried to call her over and over, and he tried to get in touch with her via other people in short succession. They go over Suzanne and Sheila's text messages where Suzanne talks about Barry, you know, pulling Mallory and Macy into their arguments again, and then sometimes after that leaving for days. He would cause all this ruckus, bring the girls into their marriage, try and get the girls on his side, which apparently it seems like he's done, and then leave the house in that state for days. Suzanne wrote, "He's not stable. I lost all respect for him that day." So yeah, I would too. You know, as parents, as husband and wives, we don't want to get our kids all involved. Even if they're adults, you try to restrain yourself a little and not get your kids all involved in your marriage. Suzanne told her friend Macy mentioned us separating or divorcing. So with Macy going on GMA recently, not that long ago in the recent past, claiming, yeah, their parents never had any problems, it was a great marriage. I mean, that's a complete lie. I don't really blame Macy though, because I look at her, especially Macy, I look at her more sympathetically. I feel like she's this Stockholm Syndrome victim who's probably afraid of getting hurt herself. But Suzanne told her friend that Barry pushed her in the closet in Colorado and put a gun to his own head and was like, "Is this what you want?" You'll hear at least about another time, at least one instance where Suzanne told her friend that Barry had pinned her down on the bed. Suzanne wrote, "I wouldn't feel safe alone with him." She told her best friend how Barry never takes the high road. He's more focused on his own image, the image of things looking good, not necessarily being good. Suzanne wrote these prophetic words, "It will eventually be shown to all when he doesn't take the high road." That was so prophetic to me. Even though way back then, you know, she couldn't have predicted how this would have ended, but boy, those words are prophetic. It will eventually be shown to all when he doesn't take the high road. They'll also talk about Barry and Suzanne arguing about Suzanne's inheritance money that Barry borrowed and was supposed to pay her back. He was kind of holding the money hostage, I guess. She had money. She put money into that 1.5 million or so home on Puma Path. Suzanne was standing her ground with Barry, and it was something new. She needed money to get away from him. "I need peace," Suzanne told Barry quite often. Indeed, she was worried about her health, and she was, overcoming cancer, and all this arguing and stress was not good for her health. But Barry would hold money over her head and ask, "How are you going to pay for your medical treatments?" I mean, what a jerk. That was such a jerk move to me, I'm sorry. This guy, this purported Christian, and I was going to put the Ephesians, 4:25 quote here, "Husbands, love your wives, as Christ loved the church." If you're so interested, this supposed Christian man, of how he's supposed to treat his wife. So anywho, listen to all that, but that's really to me a jerk move. To tell your wife who's overcome cancer, who's ready for a new lease on life, ready to get away from him, he doesn't want, of course, the divorce to happen. So instead of giving her the money back that, she got a lot of money from what I understand, at least $500,000 from her mom and her grandmom, I believe. But it was either all tied up in the house or property or wherever, and they argued a lot about getting it back because Barry knew that money was freedom to Suzanne, and he didn't want the divorce, obviously, through Suzanne's own words. This is not conjecture. I've been through a lot of court transcripts. You'll hear them coming up. This will just be a short portion. I think I recorded about maybe 6 or 7 videos, so I'll try and do a series. If I introduce them all like this, maybe YouTube will be okay with me doing that. Yeah, you'll hear just a jerk move of Suzanne just finally being done, like her own mom. She said her mom had a long fuse, but when her mom was done, she was done. I believe Suzanne was at that point. I don't know what she endured being married to Barry over all those years, but obviously the tables had turned. She was done. She was ready to leave. And a new lease on life, a new lease on health. And instead of amicably being able to just go to court and decide what's fair, who gets what, Barry was holding the money over her head and claiming he would pay her back and claiming, "Oh, well, how are you going to pay for your medical treatments?" What a horrible thing to say to someone who has overcome cancer. Instead of just saying, "Look, it didn't work out with us, but I wish you well." No, that would be taking the high road. So listen to the transcript coming up, the one I recorded, and I'll just plan to do a series if I can of all the court transcripts I had previously recorded, because it might as well not go to waste. Now that this case is back in the news, Suzanne has been found. The CBI wants, of course, valid tips, and if you've given a tip and if it was never followed up on, especially, and it's valid and useful, please, use the information I'll place below that CBI posted. Thanks so much for watching, and stay tuned.
Subscribe to Plunder.
The court transcripts for Barry Morphew on August 9th. Asking questions for the prosecution is Mr. Jeff Lindsay, and answering questions is FBI agent Ken Harris. At this point, they had just spoken about the identity of Suzanne Morphew's affair partner. Did you make efforts to try and determine who this Jeff person is? Correct. And do you eventually do so? Yes. And who do you determine him to be? Jeff Libler. Where does he reside? He lives in Michigan. I want to go now into relationships. We'll get to Mr. Libler later down the road, but as far as Suzanne and the victimology aspect, did you try to determine who was her best friend or who was her closest circle of friends, and maybe she would have communicated about potentially leaving or doing something that caused her to go missing? Yeah. In the course of the investigation, what was clear was Suzanne had several friends that were close, but it seems her closest friend is Sheila Oliver, who lives in Indiana. You said she's from Indiana? Yeah. And how long, as part of your investigation, had Sheila and Suzanne been friends? Approximately 30 years. When you're looking for the victimology part of this investigation, what specifically, as it pertains to Sheila, do you start really trying to hone in on? Well, in some ways, with Sheila, it's anything that she can tell us about Suzanne. But part of what we ended up honing in on was just what was the state of the marriage between her and Barry in 2018 to 2020. Why is that important to you to try to determine the state of the marriage? Well, again, when someone goes missing, we're just looking at whatever the potential situations are in that person's life that could be areas of conflict or areas of difficulty between them or areas of motivation in terms of what would motivate their actions. So just trying to determine, what was going on in Suzanne's life and Barry's life. And you heard Investigator Walker testify several minutes ago, and he said Mr. Morphew came up and said that it was a great marriage and they loved each other to death or something. Yes, okay. In your conversations and investigation into the friendship between Sheila and Suzanne, did it in fact reveal that type of relationship? What Sheila said is when she was contacted by Mallory within the first couple of days after Suzanne was reported missing, Mallory mentioned to her that Barry had said they had a perfect night on the night before he left for Broomfield. That would be May 9th? Yes. And what Sheila said is from her conversations with Suzanne, they hadn't had a perfect night in at least a year and a half. And so that made her concerned immediately. How does that equate to Morphew's moving to the Salida area from Indiana? Yeah, they moved in 2018. I believe they left around June 1st, 2018 to move to Colorado. So roughly a year and a half of the time is what Sheila originally said in that. So almost the entire time they've been in the Salida area. Yes, fair to say. And so I want to talk to you a little bit about some of the information that Sheila shared with you. Are you aware that Suzanne and Sheila texted quite a bit? Yes. Text messaging from their phones? Yes. And let me draw your attention to People's Exhibit 3 through 17. Mr. Lindsay, all of these have been provided on a thumb drive, Your Honor, so if I may approach the witness, the court. What were the numbers, I'm sorry? Mr. Lindsay, 3 through 17. Judge, okay, yes, you may. If you'll just review those quickly, Agent Harris, and see if you recognize those, please. Yes, I do. What are Exhibits 3 through 17, sir? These are the screenshots of text messages between Suzanne and Sheila Oliver dated in September of 2019. And then some also, I think, in March of 2020. Oh, sorry, these are just September of 2019. It could just be the September series. Yes. Where did you get these text messages? Sheila had provided me some screenshots originally, and then Sheila also recently provided screen recordings of all her text messages between her and Suzanne from 2018 through 2020. And do these exhibits 3 through 17 fairly and accurately depict, certainly not all of the text messages, but the ones that are important as far as determining the victimology aspect of the investigation? Some of them, yes. Move to admit 3 through 17. Barry's lawyer, Iris Eaton. Your Honor, I object. These are not the best evidence. The prosecution has actually a download of Ms. Oliver's phone that they just produced as of 10 days ago. And these don't indicate on the top of each screenshot the dates, the time, so we don't know if they're actually in sequence and what came before or after. But certainly the spreadsheet that they provided us a week and a half ago would actually be able to do that. Judge Murphy. Okay, I'm going to overrule the objection. The rules of evidence are relaxed in a preliminary hearing. You'll certainly have the opportunity to cross-examine Agent Harris with regard to dates and if there are other text messages that are relevant. Go ahead, Mr. Lindsay. Can we publish these and review them? One moment, we're having technical difficulties, Judge. Let me ask a few more questions of your involvement with Ms. Oliver. Did you actually interview her above and beyond just obtaining the text messages from September and even in 2018 and then forward into 2019 and 2020 as of even April of 2020? I think the last ones are. Yes, we've interviewed her a couple of times. Okay, and did that happen here or did it happen in Indiana? It happened in both places. And did she describe, tell us how it's probably hard just to encapsulate in one answer, but can you give us some of the things that she described Suzanne as a person? Miss Eaton. Objection, Your Honor. That calls for character evidence. The question asks for the judge. Ask the question. What's the question? Mr. Lindsay. Did she tell you what kind of person she was? The judge. How is that improper? It's her friend testifying about what she thinks of her friend. Miss Eaton. Well, it's 404B, Your Honor. It's character evidence. The judge. Could you ask it a different way? I don't even know why the question needs to be asked, but Mr. Lindsay, I think it's just laying the foundation as to what some of these text messages actually mean as far as Sheila's understanding. Sheila Oliver's understanding. The judge. Why do I need to hear what Sheila Oliver thinks about the characteristics of her friend? Mr. Lindsay. Well, because there's a lot of information in there that's pertinent to this court's decision that is interpreted, and definitely, if she were to testify, she'd be able to say this information. The judge. Right. Well, we know that they're best friends. We know that they're close. So obviously she has a high opinion of her friend. Otherwise, she wouldn't be friends with her. So I'm not sure how she is as a person connects to what's in these text messages. Mr. Lindsay, I can focus in on the question a little bit more, Judge. I'll just ask him a bigger, broader question. I understand. If you could. Thank you. Did Sheila know if Suzanne was employed? Yes. And what was her knowledge of that? Sheila knew that she had been a school teacher, but then had stopped working full-time as a school teacher and was taking care of raising Mallory and Macy. Was there any indication that Ms. Morphew had done any work for Mr. Morphew? She helped him with his billing, doing the books. Okay. Was there ever an indication from Sheila Oliver that Mr. Morphew was concerned about a relationship that Ms. Morphew had with Sheila Oliver? Yes, there were a couple of different times where Suzanne expressed to Sheila that Barry was asking her fairly pointedly, "Are you talking to anybody else about our marriage?" And then there were other times when Suzanne was visiting Sheila. So I think Sheila came out for her first visit after the Morphews moved to Colorado in September of 2018. And then that Thanksgiving, Suzanne went back and visited Indiana and saw Sheila during that time. And Sheila recounted that Suzanne stepped away to go to the restroom, and Barry multiple times tried to get a hold of Suzanne's phone. She wasn't answering. Then called Sheila, then called Darren, and Suzanne said it was just confusing. He seemed very suspicious of not being able to get a hold of Suzanne at this particular moment and called 3 people on a fairly short succession. Miss Eaton. Your Honor, can we have some foundation about when that occurred, the date, and where? The judge. I got a little lost in there too. Mr. Lindsay. So let's narrow that down. Sure. Talking about September 2018, Sheila comes to visit the Morphews after they've moved to the Salida area. Yes. Is that what you're referring to? No, sorry. September 2018, Sheila comes and visits Suzanne in Colorado. The next time they see each other is back in Indiana. Suzanne went back out for Thanksgiving and saw Sheila at her house, and that's when those events occurred. Miss Eaton. Your Honor, I want to object to the question regarding what's occurring
occurring in September 2018. I don't know what the relevance is to Suzanne Morphew being missing in May 2020. The judge: well, we're not talking about September 18. We're talking about November of 18. Thanksgiving? Yes. Miss Eaton: same objection. Judge: right. Mr. Lindsay: the people intend to offer 404B evidence, and right now everything is in our favor. Inferences, all evidence basically comes in. The court, as a matter of law, is only allowed to exclude evidence if it finds it basically completely unbelievable. Right now we're offering evidence that's going to lay a pattern of the relationship between Mr. Morphew and Ms. Morphew that's absolutely contrary to anything that Mr. Morphew tells investigators. It's definitely believable. Judge Murphy: the court will overrule the objection. I'm the trier of fact. I can figure out what's relevant to me in making the probable cause and proof evident determination. Mr. Lindsay: Agent Harris, I want to go back to that September 2018. You said that she's here visiting Ms. Morphew. Was there something that happened that Sheila described to you that was just kind of bizarre and weird involving Mr. Morphew? Yeah, Barry was away hunting in New Mexico or Arizona, and Sheila and Suzanne and Macy, I believe, I don't know if Mallory was there, were at the house. They saw headlights come up. Their neighborhood is fairly secluded, so they saw headlights coming up to the house. They turned off short of the Morphew's driveway, and then they thought they saw somebody walking in and coming through the driveway and up into the woods, like they were looking into the house. So they were trying to determine what was going on. They called Pete Cushman, one of the neighbors. He went out and looked around, didn't find anything. Then they still thought they saw something, so they ended up calling 911. And Suzanne spoke with the 911 dispatcher, and during the course of the 911 call, they figured out that it was the headlights come back on, and it comes into the driveway, and it was Barry in his truck coming into the neighborhood. If I could ask you to bring up 3 through 17 up. So this is People's Exhibit 3, and it starts at the top. Sunday, September 1st, and it says, "Need your prayer for peace today." Do you see that, Agent Harris? I do. As far as you understand, the text box in white belongs to who? That belongs to Suzanne. The text box in blue, who does that belong to, Agent? Sheila Oliver. So we're just going to get the highlights here. So if you go to that middle text box, Agent Harris, there's a text from Suzanne to Ms. Oliver saying, "He pulled Macy in again and left. My heart hurts for her." Have you looked into that type of text message, either beyond this or talked to Sheila? What's that context? What does it mean? Yeah, Suzanne had expressed frustration to Sheila that during arguments between Barry and Suzanne, that Barry would pull the girls in and try to get them on her side. I'm assuming they mean his side, and turn them against Suzanne. Then also afterwards, the left part, he would just leave the house and sometimes be gone for the day or for days. Okay, in the bottom one there, it kind of goes over and then down into the third part of that slide, and then we have more information from Suzanne. She writes, "He's not stable." Who is she referring to when she mentioned he's not stable? Miss Eaton: Objection, Your Honor. Is this information that this witness can testify about? I don't know if he's talked to the witness about these text messages. Judge Murphy: Your objection, so it's foundation? Mr. Lindsay: All right. Are you familiar with the subject of the conversation when she mentioned he? Yes. Ms. Eaton: I'm referring to all. I'm referring to the text messages that he's interpreting. Judge Murphy: Right. So the objection, Agent Harris, is it says he, and you're testifying that that's Barry Morphew from your understanding. So, to lay a foundation, I need to know how you believe that the he referred to, those in these texts, is Barry Morphew. I spoke with Sheila Oliver about these texts, and so that's her understanding of this context, and that she and Suzanne are talking specifically about Barry and their marriage. So Sheila Oliver said so. Judge: All right, so that's sufficient foundation. Mr. Lindsay: If we can go to 14, please. I'm sorry, 4. Here, we've got some more he stuff, right? We've got what he did in the bottom text message box. We've got he came in and wrecked it. Then the next one, he blows up. Again, those are text messages from who? Who is typing those on her phone? Yeah, the lighter ones are Suzanne. If you go to that far right one, Agent Harris, the third one in the series, Ms. Morphew refers to declining health. Do you understand what that means from the course of your investigation? Yeah. Suzanne had her cancer come back. I believe maybe initially in May of 2018, she was battling cancer again. So she's expressing a concern about just her basic health. Yes, and in the course of the investigation, agents determined that potentially this relationship was causing, throughout this period, Ms. Eaton. Objection, Your Honor, leading in foundation. Judge Murphy. Yeah, how do you have a foundation for that through this witness? Mr. Lindsay. Let me just ask you, during the text messages, is there a concern from Suzanne to Sheila about this relationship harming her health? Yes, and Sheila said specifically that was a theme of their conversations during these years, is that the toll that the fighting between Barry and Suzanne was taking on her health was one of the things that she was very concerned about. Okay, if we can go to 5, please. I want to focus on the Agent Harris. There's a discussion that says, he kept telling me his phone is going to be off because he didn't have enough battery. Is that also a concern expressed by Ms. Morphew during the course of the text messages about the phone, Mr. Morphew's phone? Ms. Eaton. Objection, Your Honor. I'm having a hard time trying to understand the relevance of this to an accusation of murder in the first degree. I object to relevance. Judge Murphy. All right, I think I already covered that about 10 minutes ago, so I'm going to overrule the objection. Mr. Lindsay, it is noon though, so probably a good time to break. Okay, Judge. So, Agent Harris, you can step down. Ms. Eaton. Your Honor, before we convene, may counsel approach? Judge. Certainly. Ms. Eaton. Your Honor, this witness's testimony about victimology packets, and there's some identification of those packets in some of the reports, but we don't have those packets, so I'm asking that the prosecution identify to us where those are in the discovery. Judge. Did he say packet or questionnaire? Ms. Eaton. Questionnaire, but they're also referred to as packets in the discovery, and we can't find them. Mr. Lindsay. They're in there. I don't know. They've been in there since early on. Okay, just. Judge. What we talked about on Friday, I would hope that the prosecution could lead them to where those are. Mr. Lindsay. They were in the initial packets. It's a questionnaire that the individual asked. I believe they were in there. The judge. Okay, then we will be on break. We will reconvene at 1:30 sharp. Court will be in recess. Thank you all. Please be seated. Okay, we're back on the record. 21 CR 78. Mr. Morphew is present with his attorneys. We've got 4 attorneys from the DA's office. We left off with Agent Harris testifying. Agent Harris, if you'll come up and take the stand. Obviously that oath that I gave you this morning is still in effect. Yes. Okay, Mr. Lindsay. So Agent Harris, I think you still have those exhibits in front of you. They should be 3 through, I believe, 17. I do. And we'd finished up with Exhibit 5, or we had just barely got into. We started talking about the phone being off. And just so we're all clear, the context of these messages, you're not reading them completely blind, correct? And can you explain more of the context of the messages and why it's important to you as a case agent for the FBI looking at victimology and just factually? Yes. After Sheila Oliver's initial interview, one of the things that she told us, again based on the comment that she had early on from Mallory about Barry saying that their last night was a perfect night, she said that's not the characterization of the marriage that she had in her close conversations with Suzanne from text messages as well as times that they got together for the entirety of the time that they were in Colorado. Sheila even talked about knowing the state of their marriage and some of the struggles going back to 2016. Ms. Eaton. Your Honor, I'm going to object to foundation. I ask that there be some specificity to when, what he's testifying to, about, what this witness is saying instead of generalizing the conversation. I don't understand when this witness said these things and what this witness said. I'd ask for that specificity. Judge Murphy, all right, I'll sustain the objection in one piece. If you can recall when you were told this by Ms. Oliver. So the initial interview, which was not with me, I don't remember the date of that. Ms. Oliver talked about the state of their marriage, and then in the interviews that we had, there was one in October in Indiana, and then there were several follow-up conversations. I don't have those dates in front of me from my report, but there were several dates where we talked about various things related to what Sheila remembers about the state of their marriage, as well as other events. So generally speaking, not talking about any specifics, but there were some themes that run throughout the text between Suzanne and Sheila. Yes. So we're on 5. One of the questions, or the question I'd asked before we broke, was this comment by Suzanne about the phone being off. Yes. In the context of your understanding of this relationship from Ms. Oliver, what does that mean? Suzanne had talked about suspicions that when Barry's phone was off, he was not where he said he was, and she was convinced that he was possibly meeting up with somebody or having an affair. If you could go to 6, please. Just so we're clear again, the white is the white text box. The lighter text boxes are Suzanne's. A fairly long text going on and on about what's going on in her life. When she says, I can't handle the unstableness, Agent Harris, what is she talking about from your understanding from Sheila Oliver? Sheila Oliver talked about the fact that, I think later in the texts, it refers to Barry as being, Miss Eaton, Your Honor, I'm sorry to object again, but I have to. I want to know when he had this conversation about this text message that he's interpreting with Sheila Oliver. I need to know the date that he had the conversation so I could find it in the record. Judge, all right, do you recall? Witness, I do not recall the date. Judge, do you have a report or something that could help you? The witness, yeah, I believe so. I don't know whether you have that. I do not have that report in front of me. Mr. Lindsay, if I can approach. Judge, yes, please do. Mr. Lindsay, is that the report? Witness, yeah. Judge, take as much time as you need to read that through. Witness, yeah, so this report, there's not a date in the report, but the notes were dated from, we had a conversation on July 8th, and then we had another conversation on August 5th of 2021. Of 2020? I'm sorry, of 2021. This year? Uh-huh. Okay, I'm sorry. You said July 8th and August 5th. So then, going back to the question, I can't handle the unstableness. Miss Oliver, what does she say, I guess they mean about that? Oh, sorry. So she talked about Barry being unstable in the sense of like something would set him off and he'd be very angry. And then there were times where he would just leave and then be fine. Suzanne didn't know what was going to set him off, so he would then move to the right there. You're right, Agent Harris, yes. And that last sentence of her text to Sheila Oliver, yes, it said, I lost all respect for him that day. What is the reference according to Miss Oliver? The reference is to a time previous to this text when they were arguing and Barry brought the girls in again and tried to talk about Suzanne being the person to blame and brought them in, and Suzanne was really unhappy with that pattern because she felt like that's not what a parent should do. You shouldn't put your children between the arguments. And she, in this particular incident, she had lost respect for Barry when that happened, when he did that. Go to 7, please. Now here in September, there's a text on the left-hand side that mentions divorce. And it says, Macy mentioned us separating or divorcing. Does Sheila Oliver have familiarity with that particular line of this text? Yeah, Sheila and Suzanne had talked about the fact that it was difficult. That it was difficult because she didn't want to have the same kind of conversations that she felt like Barry had had. But she knew that Macy saw them fighting, and there were times where they ended up talking about what was happening. And Sheila had said, Suzanne had mentioned that Macy had even mentioned them potentially divorcing as a solution to the problems. And there's a lot more information there, but I want to move over to the right-hand side in that text. That top quarter there where she's saying, loves me, can't handle the pain. In the context of your conversations with Sheila Oliver, what does that mean to you, Agent Harris? Miss Eaton. Your Honor, that calls for speculation. That question, what does that mean to you, or what did Ms. Oliver explain to you? Judge, could you rephrase the question? Mr. Lindsay, I can, Judge. Thanks. I'll be a little more artful with my questions. Within the context of your conversation with Miss Oliver, what did she understand that to mean? And then you also understand from her. Yeah, she talked about the fact that Barry was frustrated because he felt like Suzanne was not in the place where she was earlier in their marriage. And so this was often a theme. I can't deal with this if you're not giving me the love like you used to. Then it goes down a little bit further and it talks about physically and mentally, and it's rough. Getting back to the damage. Again, going back to what Ms. Oliver told you, what does that mean to her? Yeah, so physically and mentally she was concerned about her mental health, just in terms of that was just the toll of the arguments. Her physical health was two things, both while she was going through cancer treatments. It was also some incidents that she had relayed to Sheila Oliver about potential physical abuse. She had told Sheila about a time where, this was in Colorado in 2018, about Barry at some point in an argument pushing her into a closet, putting a gun to his head and saying, "Is this what you want?" Suzanne had also talked about times where Barry would pin her on the bed and wouldn't let her up when they were arguing, and talked about times where she would threaten to either call the police or involve law enforcement to stop what was going on. Let's move to number 9, please. Sorry, did you say 9 or 8? I'm sorry, 8. Would you go to the far right? I mean, obviously there's a lot of information and the court can look at this information, but if you go to the far right and it mentions do anything to come out looking good. With the context of your conversation with Miss Oliver, what does that mean to her? That Suzanne had talked about the fact that Barry was really worried about the image of their marriage on the outside, and so as long as he looked good, even if they were fighting or there were problems that were not acknowledged, he was just worried about making sure he came out looking good. 9, please. There's a discussion on the far left that goes into the second top corner, and it talks about more discussions about Macy, where she then is talking about Macy. In the context of your conversations with Miss Oliver, Agent Harris, what does this mean? Yeah, Suzanne talked about the fact that she, by the time they were into 2020 for sure, but obviously already in 2019, she's talking about Macy. That she wants to be out of the marriage, but she wants to wait until Macy is out of the house. So she's trying to hang on until Macy has graduated before she would make a decision to leave the marriage. Then if you go further down, that last text box in the middle, and it says, I told him and he said okay. Well, let's just tell the girls I'm leaving. How do you feel and you don't want me? What does that mean? In the context of your conversations with Miss Oliver, Agent Harris. Yeah, so that's more similar of a type of control mechanism of pulling the girls in and trying to use the girls. Ms. Eaton, objection, Your Honor. Is that what Ms. Oliver said, or is that just information this witness is giving us? Judge Murphy, could you clarify that? Yes. So do you mean, I'll drop the term control mechanism? Sheila said, is that okay? Sheila said that he would use the girls to try and keep Suzanne back in the marriage by saying, I'm going to tell them that you don't love me. And further up in that middle text, after the thing about Macy, is something she talked about quite a bit with Sheila as well, starting in 2019, which is, I wouldn't feel safe alone with him, meaning she wouldn't feel safe alone with Barry. Look at number 10, please. It's kind of a hodgepodge here. Sort of, the far right one contains the two combinations. It also has the continuation of that last Suzanne text box in the middle of Exhibit 10. You see how that works? I do, yeah, yes. In the reference to Macy again is, what did Sheila tell you about there? Sheila talked about the fact that Macy being in the house, Mallory being at school in Gunnison, that she saw and experienced more of the fights that they were having and the sort of state of that their marriage was in. And Mal, who is that? That relates to Mallory Morphew. If we could go to number 11, please. Agent Harris, if you can focus on the center text. And these are all attempted to be as streaming as possible, but that center text. Yes, again, a reference to divorce. And then it continues down and says, not sure B could take the high road though. First off, Sheila. Who does she know B to be? That's referring to Barry. I'm sorry. Referring to Barry. Barry Morphew? Yes. And then the text from Sheila, it kind of stands for itself. Don't believe Barry can take the high road. Yeah, she says it will eventually be shown to all when he doesn't take the high road. 12, please. Talk about that top part of it. Went from sad yesterday to mad today. What is she talking about there, according to her best friend, Sheila Oliver? So I don't know that we talked specifically about the context of this one, about what she's using the first person, so it sounds like she's talking about herself, but I don't know that Sheila and I talked about that specific one. Okay. Then if you could turn over to the last text box on the far right and reading that full text box into that other one and then moving into 13. Can you look at that, Agent Harris? Yes. What is Sheila's understanding of Suzanne's text regarding those text boxes? Yeah, so Suzanne was referring here to her mom, Adrienne, who had divorced from her father, Gene. And just comparing herself, saying, I'm kind of like my mom. She has, and it looks like a mistype for an A, she has a long fuse, but once she's made her decision, it was firm. And so Suzanne had communicated to Sheila that she was done. It was just a matter of timing as to when she was going to be able to get out of the marriage. So, on 13, Agent Harris, and the focus here, I want it to go to the blue box in the middle. The context of that is some type of job. What is Sheila saying to Suzanne there, according to Sheila? Yeah, so the middle top text is talking about, thinking about a job you would enjoy and how you can live a happy and healthy life and make some what-if plans. Sheila began to ask Suzanne to consider, what are you going to do if you do need to separate and you need to live on your own? So are there jobs you can enjoy? Is there a way that you can have some money on your own? How are you going to support yourself? In that very last text box down on the far right, Agent Harris? Yes, the white one. What is the context there from Ms. Oliver? Just short of wishing he'd just get fed up with me and leave. And so Suzanne got to the point where when they were going back and forth, she just wished that Barry would find somebody else and move on and be able to let her get out of the marriage. Go to 14, please. It looks like we have the 2 in the middle there. I want to talk to you about whichever one you want, the one on the left or the one on the right. The text box about he wants me to be the bad guy. Again, going back to Sheila Oliver, what is she telling you? And what does that mean to her? Well, it's what she states right above in the text box there. No, but he wants to look good. So it's that similar theme we talked about previously where Suzanne had communicated to Sheila that Barry would want to look good. If they were going to get out of the marriage, it had to be Suzanne's fault. Go to 15, please. The left-hand corner by the first slide there, the first screenshot. Can't do anything until we get our full payment for the house, so maybe January. So these text screens are all in September of 2019. Now she's moving forward and looking towards January 2020, according to this text. What does Sheila understand that to mean, Miss Eaton? Your Honor, can we have the witness identify what time these texts were? There's no timestamp on the top. Judge Murphy, I don't know if there's a way to do that. I'm also not certain why that's important. Miss Eaton, I want to be able to track the text messages. Judge Murphy, is there a way for you to tell what time these texts were sent? Witness, not with these screenshots, no. Judge, okay, well, I don't think we're going to be able to do that. Mr. Lindsay. So, Agent Harris, the question was, in the context of Sheila's understanding of what Suzanne is discussing there, the full payment for the house, maybe January. Is she talking about that Puma Path residence? No. Suzanne and Sheila had talked about, again, whether she could have some money on her own and the house in Indiana had not. the Morphew house in Indiana had not sold. And so Suzanne is referring to the fact that she can't do anything until they get the full payment for that house, and that it's possibly going to happen in January of 2020. And does that line or that thought process continue into the next slide over? Yes. So on the top, she talks about, I'd like to talk to my sister about it. She's referring to Melinda, who had divorced from her husband John, Melinda Baumunk. And then she says that she, Melinda, had been able to make it on the inheritance money from Mom and Helen. That's what we referenced earlier. That's money that Suzanne had that was tied up in the Puma Path house. An agent, spending more time on this one a little bit, going down to the last white text box and to the next slide. Is there more discussions about money? And what did Sheila understand that to mean? Yeah, it says B, meaning Barry, said he would pay all that back to me. And yeah, this was part of the conversation Suzanne was repeatedly asking, wanting that money back. And there were arguments about whether or not and when Barry was going to pay that back to her. And she's referring to what money? The inheritance that she got from her mom and from Helen. And we talked a little bit about the spy pen and some of the discussions in the spy pen. Is this also potentially referenced in one of the recordings from the spy pen? They are arguing about money in one of the recordings on the spy pen. I don't know for sure which money it is, but it's talking about paying back money from Barry to Suzanne. Okay, 16 please. Start with Suzanne's I stood my ground, he left again. What does that mean to you, Agent Harris, in the context of what Sheila had told you about this relationship between Suzanne Morphew and the defendant? During 2019 and then in 2020, Suzanne started to become a little bit more independent, and so in these conversations and arguments, she would stand her ground and set boundaries. It was something that she hadn't really done before, so it was something new. As you go down to that next text box from her said, told him I'm done. Had Sheila told you that she had either had discussions about divorce or ending the marriage with Suzanne? Yeah, Suzanne through 2019 and into 2020 was talking about the fact that she was talking to Barry about that she couldn't keep doing this again, that she wanted to leave. She was going to try to wait until Macy was out of the house. And this phrase in here, that I need peace, was something that Sheila was very aware of Suzanne saying to her, and also having reported that she said it to Barry quite often. So that third column there says, talks about the girls, and then it goes into need money and has 2 girls. What does Sheila understand that to mean, Agent Harris? Yeah, so this is again the pattern of using either holding money over her head or the girls in some way to keep her from getting out of the marriage. So 17, please. A lot of information in this slide, Agent Harris. Hold on a second. Maybe we don't have that one displayed, but you have it in front of you, Agent Harris? Yes. And there's a text box in there that says, he said, so you want to be on your own? You want me to stop paying all your medical bills? That's a text from Suzanne to Sheila. Yes. What does that mean to you from the context of Sheila's understanding of the relationship? It was a point of contention that when Suzanne would talk about possibly leaving, Barry would talk about, how are you going to pay for various things, including all your medical bills for cancer? And then the next box over there, excuse me, to your right, I told him if he got angry and all, I would file a restraining order on him. Agent Harris, what did Sheila Oliver tell you about that text? Yeah, so this is the sort of thing that Suzanne said she would use to stop an argument. Possibly call the police or 911 or say she was going to file a restraining order against Barry. And you said stop an argument? Yes. If I could approach the witness judge, sure. I'm handing you what's being marked as People's 18 through 26. If you could take those, please. Agent Harris, can you look over those, please? Okay, I've looked them over. What are exhibits 18 through 26, Agent Harris? They are text message screenshots between Suzanne and Sheila Oliver from March of 2020. Okay, same thing. As you look at those, People's Exhibit 18 through 25, are those fair and accurate copies of the screenshots that Chaffee County And the rest of us, law enforcement folks, were provided via Sheila Oliver? Yes. Judge Murphy. Mr. Lindsay, I don't know if you asked to have 13 through 17 introduced as evidence? If you did, I missed it. Is that your request? I thought I did ask to admit those. If you did, I missed it. So are you asking that those? I would ask to admit those, Judge, please. Any objection? Ms. Eaton. The same foundational objection as before. Judge, if I missed it, I apologize. 3 through 17 are admitted. I'm sorry, did you answer whether or not those were fair and accurate copies of the text that you received from Ms. Oliver? Yes, they are, and not all of them. We know this is a selection for the purpose of this hearing. So I'm moving to admit, I'm not sure if I did this or not, but I'm going to do it twice. Judge, 18 through 25. Any objection to the omission of 18 through 25? Same relevance and foundational objection, says Ms. Eaton. Judge, okay, 18 through 25 are admitted. Mr. Lindsay, this goes through 26, just if that's what you meant. I'm sorry, 26. All right, through 26. Agent Harris, the first series of texts were September 2019. Anything changed between September 2019? Let's close at this point. Next up, we will go through the series of text messages where Suzanne begins speaking about how she spoke with Macy about divorce. Let's close with Matthew 28:18 through 20. Then Jesus came to them and said, "All authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, and teaching them to obey everything I have commanded you. And surely I am with you always, to the very end of the age." Thanks for sticking with me and listening. We will continue reading selected portions of the court transcripts for Barry Morphew. Take care.